You-
I'm hurting, baby. I'm broken down. I need your loving, I need it now. When I'm without you, I'm something weak. You got me begging.
Good morning, everyone.
On my knees. I wanna be needing your love. I just wanna be deep in your love. And it's killing me when you're away. Oh, baby, 'cause I really don't care where you are. I just wanna be there where you are. And I gotta get one little taste. Your sugar, yes please. Won't you come and put it down on me? I'm right here, 'cause I need little love and little sympathy. Yeah, you show me good loving, make it alright. Need a little sweetness in my life. Your sugar, yes please. Won't you come and put it down on me? Hey, my broken pieces, you pick them up. Don't leave me
Good
hanging.
morning, everybody.
Give me some. When I'm
We're just waiting for a couple of folks to trickle in here.
you are the one thing I'm living for. I wanna be needing your love. I just wanna be deep in your love. And it's killing me when you're away. Oh, baby, 'cause I really don't care where you are. I just wanna be there where you are. And I gotta give it one little taste. Sugar, yes please. Won't you come and put it down on me? I'm right here, 'cause I need little love and little sympathy. Yeah, you show me good loving, make it alright. Need a little sweetness in my life. Your sugar, yes please. Won't you come and put it down on me? Yeah. I want that red velvet, I want that sugar sweet. Don't let nobody touch it unless that somebody's me. I
Okay.
gotta be a man, there ain't no other way. 'Cause girl, you're hotter than Southern California.
All right. Good morning, everybody. We're still probably going to get a couple more folks trickle in the next few minutes, but in the interest of time, as we always do, to try to start promptly and end promptly, I think we're going to dive right into this. So, good Monday morning, everybody. Nice to see you all in the squares. Welcome to unit number 2 research, our final workshop of this particular part of the cohort, which is named brainstorming on the Spark Montreal website. This is the final 3-hour workshop as part of the Spark Montreal Fellowship. And we are so excited to get started. We have a very busy next 3 hours. And just to frame what it is we're going to be doing today, Shelley, if you wouldn't mind dropping the agenda again in the chat, just so folks can see as a visual what we have going on today. This workshop is really divided into 2 parts. Part 1, we are going to hear from the wonderful Tema Smith, who I'm going to introduce in just a quick moment. This next hour and a half is really going to focus on moving from barriers to belonging, and we're going to hear more about what that's going to cover from Tema. And part 2, after a 15-minute break, is going to be brainstorming in user-centered design with Rabbi Appel. Just a reminder to rename yourselves as you wish, especially for Tema, who is our guest this morning. And you'll also note that we might have a couple other special guests join us from the community. I see here Rabbi Ellen Greenspan has joined us from Temple Emmanuel. Welcome, Rabbi Greenspan. And we might have one other just to hear, especially for the first hour and a half, some of the things that Tema is going to be speaking about. So welcome to those of you who are joining us for what might be for the first time. As I mentioned, we're going to have 2 breaks this morning. One that's going to be a quick bio break, with Tema, and then we're going to have a 15-minute break and then transition into our part 2. So building off of our last session in February, when we welcomed Tema to the group, we're going to be diving a little bit deeper today into what it means to foster a sense of community and to better serve interfaith families, couples, and members with intersectional identities, how we can move forward as organizations, as members of the community. Tema is going to review understanding and overcoming bias, as well as inclusion statements. And we are very excited today because we're going to be shaking things up a little bit, building off of your feedback that we receive at the end of every single workshop. We are going random in terms of breakout rooms, and you're going to have the opportunity to get to mix and connect with what might be some new members that you haven't had the opportunity to speak with. And it's a terrific opportunity to connect with other folks from different teams. So that's a heads up about what's coming. Last but not least, Tema Smith is the Director of Jewish Outreach and Partnerships at the Anti-Defamation League and was formerly the Director of Professional Development at 18 Doors. I'm going to drop in our chat her complete bio, and I encourage you to follow her on Twitter because you'll see all the things that she is involved in and supporting across the community and across the country. Last but not least, Tema Smith, welcome, and the floor is over to you.
Hi all, thank you so much for being here again with me. Thanks again for having me. As I know I mentioned to you last time, I used to be Director of Professional Development at 18 Doors, and it's kind of in that capacity-ish that I'm here with you today, just going through some of the trainings that I had developed in that role. And so today, I'm hoping that we can dive a little bit deeper into some of the conversation we started last time. So hopefully you can recall some of what we talked about last time, but if you can't, don't worry, we're going to go through a little bit and dive a little bit deeper. So I am trying to share my screen out of share my slides out of my browser today. So let's hope for the best here. Give me 1 second to get this going. There we go. I didn't switch to my 18 Doors computer, so I was a little worried about how that was going to go. Okay. All right. All right, we might be looking at it in my browser because apparently moving ahead is not working. All right, we're just going to look at it in the edit mode. I'm sorry, everyone, this isn't quite as elegant, but here we are. So today, as Carly mentioned, we are talking about moving from barriers to belonging. So just like we did last time, I want to start very briefly with a handful of communication agreements, recognizing that we're going to be delving into some pretty hot topics today. So generally speaking, I like to start this by just kind of getting a nod or a thumbs up that we agree today to speak from a place of personal experience. All of us have different experiences with things like interfaith families and interfaith marriage. Some of us might be in one, some of us might be the children of one, and some of us might have relatives in one, and we might all have very different perspectives on how this plays into Jewish life today. So really speaking from a place of personal experience sort of helps us navigate that sort of difference in experience. Related to that, engaging with respect or kavod, giving honor to the other people, really just allows us to elevate the conversation. Listen with resilience. Some stuff might be uncomfortable. Sit with it. Move up, move back. If you find yourself talking a lot, maybe take a step back and see who else might want to contribute to the room. If you're finding yourself not feeling compelled, push yourself to speak up. And then, of course, sort of the confidentiality bit, what we learn travels with us, what we say stays here. Does anyone want to add any others? You can just throw them in the chat. Oh, look at this. I think there's like a slide control thing in Zoom. Interesting. Let's see what happens. You're all seeing my slides still, right? We're like in a good place with that. Now you should be seeing a black screen. Okay. Nope, that did not work. It was a valiant effort. Okay. So we're going to start at a place that we just kind of skimmed over last time. And this is actually going to be an opportunity for us to go into small groups to chat. So you might remember last time we started with the question of when you think of Jewish families, who comes to mind, what do they look like, and what does their Judaism look like? And then asking that same question about interfaith families. So what I'd love us to do today is think about that together in small groups and think about are there any similarities or differences between your two lists? How do you feel your upbringing influenced your thinking about this? How do you think pop culture influenced your thinking about this? And how do you think your professional life influenced your thinking about this? So I'm going to let Shelly do her breakout room magic, and I will put this all into the chat. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. So, all right, and off to breakout rooms we go. So we'll spend about 8 minutes in breakout rooms.
You don't know me, but I'm your brother. I was raised here in
Welcome back, Gloria.
living hell.
We're just waiting for others to join.
They'll be back in 26 seconds.
Fairly soon, the time will tell. You
I love the music. It's such a good touch.
telling me the things
These are all everyone's choices, and
I
we
know.
put them together in a playlist, which is awesome.
They've been doing this we have like Monday all staff briefing. And we had a baseball themed one for opening week last week. And we all came to take me out to the ball game. It was great.
Welcome back, everyone.
I know. It's always too fast, and I'm sorry. But I promise we're gonna have more time to discuss. And this is really just like to open the floodgates to the conversation that we're gonna have later. And so I'm really sorry. Squishing a lot of this into an hour and a half is tough. So let's just pause for a moment though, and I'd love to hear some reflections back over like the next 3-ish minutes of what those conversations were like in your rooms. What did you notice about different people's sort of perceptions, your own perceptions, anything like that? I'm gonna ask if anyone wants to volunteer to unmute themselves. Otherwise, I will just randomly call someone. I will also say when I randomly call people, you're always allowed to pass. But anyone want to be the brave one to start? All right, I'm going to, oh, Lara, amazing. Go for it.
So we discussed how family does not look today the way it did 40 years ago. We discussed how on screen family doesn't look like it even did 20 years ago. And that presence just keeps driving things forward to open. But then we also acknowledged that having that crack open, you still have to follow through with action. And so it's not enough to say you're okay with interfaith families. You have to have a policy saying your shul accepts interfaith families as things like that. So you actually have to turn it into concrete action.
Awesome. Any other groups want to jump in?
I'll jump in. It's Jody from CJA. We talked about how it seemed that there was not for everyone, but some commonality that our upbringing seemed to influence the way that we looked at things, that the expectations that were placed on us by our own families helped to give us the perspective of what marrying Jewish or not marrying Jewish looked like, and how we were forming our own lives. And now we started to sort of get into a different conversation about what's next. How are we influencing our children, and what are the expectations that we're giving them, and how do we think about it? Do we think the same? So obviously the 8 minutes flew. So we barely even scratched the surface, but it started to give us some questions of thinking forward.
Great. Any other groups want to jump in very quickly?
I'll just say I was in Jody's group as well, but I'll just chime in to say how, as in much of our lives and our perspectives and our opinions, I find they're quite heavily informed by the messaging around us, by our upbringing, our community, and I think I'll speak just personally. For me, part of the work right now is sort of extricating myself from the generation before me, or my schooling, or my own community, and how do I feel. Is how much of what I feel has been informed by what has been made to be important by other people and by tradition.
I muted myself. All right. Amazing. Okay, so let's dive into some of the content, and then we're going to have an opportunity to go back into those same groups sort of towards the end of this segment to continue the conversation. I'm never sure when I start whether I'm going to send you back to the same groups or new random configurations, but I think we're going to go back to the same groups today. So I'm going to try to share my screen, and let's hope. I think I got this working properly. So let's hope. Yay. Okay. So we're going to start today by thinking a little bit about the idea of bias. So what is bias? Bias is a tendency, inclination, or prejudice toward or against something or someone that results in, and here's the key little nugget, a cognitive shortcut in determining the characteristics of that person or a thing. Biases form the lenses through which we interpret the world. They can be helpful or they can be harmful. We all have biases. It's actually how our brains are wired that enable us to function in the world. One of the sort of very ordinary examples that they give a lot in sort of bias training is like if you walk into a buffet and you see like a tray of salad and a tray of French fries, you don't have to actually go through the nutritional makeup of this. You have been conditioned to see healthy option, unhealthy option. What you do with that is up to you, but the key is that your brain immediately jumps there. So whether positive or negative, what's interesting about bias, when we talk about this, those cognitive shortcuts can result in prejudgments that lead us to not display the welcome we aspire to, even if those are positive cognitive associations. So when we talk about bias, we're talking about three kinds: institutional, interpersonal, and internalized. Our focus for a lot of today is going to be internalized and a little bit of interpersonal. Internalized is also somewhat implicit, which is attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding and actions and decisions in an unconscious manner. These biases, which encompass both favorable and unfavorable assessments, are activated involuntarily and without our awareness or intentional control. So, key characteristics. They're pervasive, we all have them. Implicit and explicit biases are related but distinct mental constructs. They're not mutually exclusive and they might even reinforce each other. They actually don't necessarily align with our declared beliefs or even reflect stances we would explicitly endorse. we generally, and here's something really key, tend to hold implicit biases that favor our own in-group. The research has shown that we can still hold implicit biases against our in-group. So you might remember in our last session together, we asked the question of most of the people who I spend my time with are Jewish. Some of these things are some of the things to be thinking about when we think about what bias might look like. Implicit biases are malleable. Our brains are complex. Implicit associations can be that we have formed, can be gradually unlearned through a variety of debiasing techniques. So we're going to talk about a handful of those when it comes to interfaith families. So pervasive, related but distinct to explicit, don't necessarily align with our declared values, favor our own in-group, and malleable. So what kind of biases are we talking about when we talk about our work with interfaith families? And I'm just going to name this. I am coming at this at a totally values neutral way. This is not about what I think is the right way to behave or believe or act. This is about what we might be carrying with ourselves for any number of reasons that might affect our work. In marriage is preferable to intermarriage. Racial biases, like who's a Jew, biases about LGBTQ families, and biases about who counts as Jewish. That's more, racial is like who looks Jewish, who counts as Jewish is more like matrilineal descent, patrilineal descent, and things like that. So how does bias show up in our work? How we think of typical Jewish families. You might notice that these are sort of all kind of one kind of look of a family. Googling Jewish families is very interesting in Google image search. Words that show a bias. So this is a poster from an event that was 3 rabbis in conversation. And the first line was, how do you encourage intramarriage? How do you create expectations? So very clear that encouraging intermarriage and expectations placed on interfaith families were the sort of baseline. Social scientific research. We have all of these sources that we use to measure Jewish identity, to inform our work. How do we determine what we use to measure Jewish identity? A lot of them ask really similar questions. Do you belong to a synagogue? Do you give to Jewish causes? Do you light Shabbat candles? Do you have a formal Jewish education? There's a bunch more, but ultimately the question is, do we have a clear way to measure Jewish identity? I would argue that no. Jewish reporting. Jennifer Thompson, and I'll make sure that you get this article, has studied insider-outsider language in reporting on the Jewish community and identifies that interfaith families and the way that the Jewish press talks about them are some of the most commonly sort of framed as outsiders. Here's a couple of examples. This is a quote from her article. Jonathan Tobin, who's the senior online editor of Commentary, contrasted the core Jewish population to assimilated Jews who donate money to non-Jewish causes rather than Jewish ones, and to increasingly secular members of community, even or especially those who have intermarried. So a lot of assumptions of who those intermarried couples are. Or the unaffiliated connotes those who are lost temporarily or possibly permanently to the Jewish community. And sort of intermarriage is part of the equation of unaffiliated people who are lost. And even more recently, Stephen Cohen, the sociologist who has been Me Too'd out of the Jewish community, had an article in the Forward in 2016, which of our grandchildren will be Jewish in this age of intermarriage? You can probably guess by the headline that his answer was like none of them. And this was looking at Pew statistics. And you can contrast, and reporting can obviously shape the way we think of it, because the same statistics led a different journalist to conclude this year, intermarriage increasingly leads to Jewish children. So same statistics, opposite conclusions. So really what we're talking about when we think about bias and we think about our work with interfaith families is who gets to be an insider and who gets to be an outsider, and how do we relate? So some of you might remember last time we talked a little bit about the difference between welcoming and belonging. Even that displays a little bit of a bias, right? When we're talking about welcoming somebody into our community, it's painting them as an outsider who needs to be brought in. Whereas when we talk about belonging, it's who's allowed to be an insider. So we're going to spend some time thinking about some of the ways to unpack our biases. And when I think about this with interfaith families, I think of sort of three key areas. Personal reflection, asking ourselves questions like, what are my opinions here? What am I afraid of? How can I sort of think about this differently, so on and so forth. And that's not to say like lots of people hold the opinion that interfaith marriage is not good for the Jewish people, and I'm not here to judge anyone for that opinion. I just want to state that. And then on the flip side, there are people who believe that interfaith marriage is going to, change the Jewish community in really positive ways, and I'm not here to judge that either. I'm just here to encourage you to ask the questions. Personal reflection, brave conversation, and telling new stories. So what might that look like? What are my personal feelings about intermarriage? Do I or my colleagues have any fears about intermarriage? How can we talk about this at our organizations or in our families? What are the new stories we can tell ourselves about intermarriage? How has our community been strengthened by intermarriage? Now, you'll notice that these are moving from sort of identifying where you personally sit and your colleagues and your organization to positive framing. And the reason for that is that even if you personally have reservations or whatever that might be, when we are looking to ensure people belong, being able to call up those positive stories does a lot to correct the biases that we might be personally carrying. Oh, nope, that wasn't supposed to happen yet. We're going to go to breakout rooms to discuss these things. I'm going to stop sharing so I can pop those into the chat. Get back to, okay, there we go. And this is how we're going to end this first half. So questions are in the chat, and let's all head back to breakout rooms. Actually, first, does anyone have any questions? Because we just did a bunch of content. Awesome. With no questions being asked, let's go to breakout rooms. If anyone has any that come up, you can just ping me on the chat. I am here at my computer, and we are going to spend 10 minutes this time.
Rabbi Boris, do you see your breakout room? Yeah. Oh,
He's got.
we lost it. All right. Very good.
It's funny doing this with him because he's been through this training.
Okay.
You should do it. You would be a good dog mom, Carly.
You'd be the best.
I want to be that dog. That dog would be so
Next.
spoiled.
Time flies. How is it already 10:15?
I'm just
I think
like,
this is
how am
my
I
addition
getting?
to the playlist?
It's an excellent choice. Nope. Oh, we have a dog. Okay. This is the 2-year-old. The little Zoom celebrity. He's on everything.
He looks so cuddly. He's just like,
He's so cuddly. Like, he will sleep next to your head on your pillow. Like he just like, which I thought I would have hated, but kind of love it.
So sweet.
If you wanna be my lover, you gotta get with my friends.
Welcome back, everyone.
I'm sorry, it probably wasn't enough time again. I know. But hopefully it's again starting to allow you some more time to think through some of the harder issues as we shift, for some of us, really shift our work to being really intentional about interfaith inclusion. And for others, really start to put language to the work that we are already doing of interfaith inclusion. So let's spend like the next 6 to 8 minutes just sharing back into those space what those conversations were like for you. And just to give you sort of a what's coming next, we're going to take a 5-minute break and we're going to take a little look at inclusion statements and hopefully get to the time in your, like, I'm going to get it wrong, your institutional, not your homeroom, your team. I believe I have the terminology correct now, to do some work. If not, it'll just be homework for you all to do at your organization later, because there's not going to be enough time to finish it one way or another. So that's my thinking now. So anyone want to be the first to share back this time?
I can jump in.
Awesome.
Sweet. So I am a person, a result of interfaith relationship, and in an interfaith relationship as well. So obviously I'm very biased towards that. But one thing I do find, I guess, interesting, and what these questions make me think about is, how are we defining Judaism? It's such a complex thing, because I think for a lot of people, it's the religion, it's the rules you follow. But I think for a lot of other people, it's the culture, it's what the media you engage in and how you present yourself. So I think like we're all going to have a very different opinion depending on what Judaism means to that one person, because even from the outside looking in, I think it's a complicated thing to understand. I've had a lot of conversations with my partner, and she's like, well, is Judaism a religion? Is it an ethnicity? Is it an ethno-religion? That's a whole thing that I think was made up for the Jewish experience, because it's so much deeper than, I believe in Jesus, therefore I am Christian, or I believe in Muhammad, therefore I am Muslim. It's there's plenty of rules, I think, that we either abide by or don't necessarily believe in, but I've had rabbis tell me, yeah, that's the Jewish thing. It's like, what's the saying? It's like 7 different rabbis and 8 different opinions or something like that. So it's complicated. And I think like it's important to have these conversations, but I think it's even more important to understand that we're not going to come out of this with all the answers. I think if we leave this with more questions, then that's a beautiful thing. And hopefully those more questions could lead us to a safer and better place for all Jews.
I love that. I feel like that's the Jewish answer, right? Is that, all the jokes about what's a Jew is a person who like answers a question with a question. We are, if there's like, no matter which way we approach Judaism and which sort of strand of Judaism we come from, we are all a questioning people. Like that's what we do. That's in our culture, it's in our religion. I don't think it's in our ethnicity, because like that doesn't really work, but that's so key. And so my role here, and like, my biases out there, I'm in an interfaith relationship. My parents were in an interfaith relationship. My brother's in an interfaith relationship. And at the same time, when people ask me, do I think, is it a good thing? My answer, and I don't usually tell people my bias here, but my answer is, I actually think it's neutral. It's what interfaith couples do with their Jewish identity that is where you can assign value, right? Like that's where I'm at with it, because I was raised Jewish, doing Jewish things. And now I am a Jewish professional who does Jewish things. And I jokingly say, the head Jew at the ADL. Like, my job is to do the Jewish things for one of the largest Jewish organizations in North America. Like, that's crazy, right? So it's what we do with it that I think is where what I often will encourage people to do, not usually this explicitly, is that we're not going to stop interfaith marriage for people who think that that's sort of the path. Like, the numbers show that, right? That's very clear. It's how to encourage people to do Jewish that I think really cracks things open. That our opportunity as people who care deeply about the Jewish people and Jewish community is to give people the tools and the space to explore and deeply engage with Judaism, whatever that might mean in each of our organizations, because the interfaith couples that are approaching any of our organizations are going to look very different from each other in what they are and what they're looking for. That's another thing. If you take away one thing from this, there's interfaith couples. You might remember the whole spectrum. I didn't talk about the spectrum of belief and of Jewish practice, but everything from like people who observe Shabbat and go to synagogue every week, keep kosher at home, to people who are what one would call culturally Jewish, and everything in between. People who do both. And all of the things. So we are all in our different organizations going to attract different people looking for different things. And sometimes the same people looking for different things from each of our organizations. So naming a bunch of things for us. Anyone else want to sort of, sorry, I don't usually monologue, but I'm like feeling excited about this group. So anyone else want to unmute and throw some stuff out into the chat, into the group? If anyone wants to private message me your thoughts, I will say them out loud on your behalf anonymously. That's always also an option. I know this can be like a little bit of a vulnerable topic, so. I'm not going to call on anyone for this one because it is a little bit of a vulnerable topic. So I want to like respect people's willingness to share here. So I'm going to give like one more minute for anyone to sort of, oh, Sarah, go for it. Oh, sorry, somebody else said something too. So who are the people? Sarah?
Yeah, I can't raise my hand because I'm driving and I can't turn my camera on, but you can call on me when you,
okay, great. Else. So Sarah and then Rabbi Ellen.
I really appreciated what J. Rob had to say just then. So thank you. And I am also, as I've mentioned before, I'm from an interfaith family. I have an interfaith relationship, but something that I was thinking about recently, because I always try to pull back and look at things kind of bigger picture. And it's just thinking about how I think our question of interfaith is very specific to the Jewish community. But I'm also thinking that like, we're not alone in this question of like, assimilation or marrying out, you know, like being a part of other groups, melding identities. Like, I feel like this is an issue that's facing a lot of groups. I won't get into specifics because I haven't researched this too deeply, but in a weird way, like I sometimes think about that as something that kind of comforts me, like, especially that early on in this whole conversation when Rabbi Appel was talking about religion in general and keeping like how different religious groups are, you know, how do we keep people engaged and participating? So that's something I like to think about sometimes, because I confess to being someone who is product of interfaith marriage, not a problem with it, but also sometimes, yeah, I have those existential questions too, but I think that there's a lot of other groups that are also kind of dealing with this in their own way. So to me, like, it feels like a more positive thing to think about it as a challenge facing lots of different groups. That's what I wanted to add.
Great, Rabbi Ellen.
Thank you, and sorry for not having my camera on. I mean, sorry.
No worries.
My daughter is coming to Montreal from New York for Passover, so I'm going to pick her up at the airport. I just wanted to say, so Temple is not an official participant. I'm participating this morning as a guest. So I'm, you know, representing Temple, but I'm also just representing my own views as a Reform rabbi, because my views didn't change when I became a rabbi at Temple, but the rabbis at Temple will officiate at intermarriages for exactly the reasons that you said, that we think that it enriches the Jewish community and that couples who get married by a rabbi are more likely to raise Jewish children. So like I said, I didn't change my views when I moved here to take this job. Like I already was officiating intermarriages in New Jersey. I really do believe that all of us are enriched by having interfaith families in our communities. And like you said, you know, those children are going to grow up to be the leaders of our communities someday.
Right. Absolutely. So poor Netta meant to send me something privately, but it's in the chat for everyone. So Netta, thank you for being brave enough to send it to me privately, and sorry that everyone is seeing it. But I do want to provide just some framing and context, and then we're going to take about a 5-minute break and come back. I think Netta actually is expressing something that I would say is a very, very, very widely held view in the Jewish community. And I am here to say, first of all, let's not judge that view, right? That there are different ways of understanding what it means to have a Jewish family. And for many people, understanding that constructing a family with somebody who you marry who is of that same background is considered to be key to a commitment to that religion. But I think what Netta names here that I think is really important, and this is like the point here, right, is that it's hard to not feel judgment while being supportive of those couples, right? And so this is, I think, the balance for a lot of us who work in Jewish communal space, even people who are like, this is enriching, this is great. You know, that there is sort of a balance of like, what does Jewish life look like? This is what we're trying to sort of always hold, is what we think an ideal Jewish life looks like, one way or another, with how do we support the people who do things that look differently from that. And whether that's about interfaith marriage, whether that's about like where you send your kids to school, what neighborhood you choose to live in, it really is that tension that we hold when we're trying to be inclusive and cultivate belonging in spaces where we have strong opinions about what being and doing look like. So I want to name that because I think it's so common that we use like an interfaith family as sort of the place to be like, there are people who support it and there are people who don't, and like this is like a line. But I think actually very realistically, this is something that we are trying to navigate very, very carefully. And Netta, I just want to read out, says that she's sorry if she hurts any feelings here. And so I just want to encourage everyone to like receive Netta's feelings with the intention of them, right? That she is coming with a particular set of commitments and ideas of what Jewish life looks like. And so when we are having these conversations in community spaces, we are having these conversations with the full spectrum of what Rabbi Ellen expressed to what Netta expressed. So actually it's a good thing that it came out in this space. I want to just like name that because you're all working together in a group for the rest of this, thinking about interfaith families and programming for interfaith families. Okay, there are a couple of hands up. What I want to ask is if you are going to respond to Netta to sort of to disagree in any way, let's leave that because ultimately we're not here to change each other's opinions on it. We're here to think about what is the best way to work with interfaith families despite our individual commitments. So I'm just going to ask if that's anyone's intention. Let's just like hold space for the fact that we disagree here. All right, let's go J-Rob and then Miri, and then we're going to take a break because we do want to talk about inclusion statements. So go for it.
Cool. Well, I'm actually, I do appreciate the perspective, even if it is, something that I can't really relate to in my experience. But I would like to present, I guess, the inverse of that anxiety.
J-Rob, can I just put a pin in it? Because I think we want to get to the idea of like how we can work with interfaith couples, and we're not here to necessarily change each other's minds on it. So I think
I'm not necessarily trying to change anybody's minds. I just think well, I think I can provide some value to the conversation given my experience. But if we don't have time for that, then I suppose we can move on.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to cut you off because like I think it's really important for all of us to bring our experience here. And at the same time, I want to make sure that we can get to sort of the really deep questions that we have in the next half hour or so of like inclusion statements and serving interfaith families. We've talked a lot about our personal experiences. We've talked a lot about who are interfaith families, what do we know, how are the biases. So I would encourage you, like if you and Netta want to talk to each other directly, I invite you to make that, to do that, but I just want to make sure that we get to the rest of the content.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry.
Netta, if you would like to reach out, please feel free.
So I think we're modeling exactly some of the communication agreements that we started at the beginning, and some of the sort of the content that we covered about. We're all coming into this with different opinions and different from different positions. And so that is something really important to hold on to. And I just want to name that. I'm really sorry to cut this off, but we need a 5-minute break and I still have half an hour of content. So we're going to run out of time. So feel free, if anyone wants to like stay on in the 5-minute break and talk to me, that's totally cool. Or message me. I'm going to stay here. But let's take a 5-minute break. So sorry, Miri, that I couldn't. I'm just like, oh my gosh, we're not going to get to inclusion statement.
No, not at all. I mean, there's a lot to unpack with a lot of different people.
Yeah. Things look so bad everywhere in this whole world. What is fair? We walk the line and try to see, falling behind what could be. Oh, bring me a higher love. Bring me a higher love. Oh, bring me a higher love. Where's that higher love? I keep thinking of.
We are back. If you can hear a little windy, come on back, turn your screens back on, and join us for the next section.
Welcome back. Whoever added Whitney Houston to the playlist, thank you. That's perfect for this morning. So I had to cut Miri off before and I felt so terrible, but Miri like very graciously put in the chat what she wanted to say. And it's actually the perfect thought to transition us from part 1 to part 2. So I'm just going to read it into the space. And what Miri said here is that, referring back to the conversation we were having, that she prefers to recognize what's being expressed by what may be perceived as negative judgment. It's the fear of losing something or someone valuable and the fear around the unknown. In essence, the interfaith quote issue forces internal and external conversations that all couples, same faith or not, ought to be having about values and choices. And I think that's really, really, really important to remember, right? That we are talking about in many ways, in all sorts of ways, our community is at an inflection point, right? And this isn't the first time the Jewish community has been at an inflection point. I just want to name that. And so sometimes what comes out is fear about what does this look like next? So just naming that into the space. And I think this is really perfect to pivot here. I don't know that we're going to get to the group work that I was intending, and I think that's fine because this is stuff that you can bring back with you to your organization. This part was meant to be done in groups within your organization, so I'll make sure that you get like a worksheet to help you out here. But I'm going to dive back into the slides now that I have figured out how to make this work properly, and try and leave some time at the end for questions. So that is not where I wanted to. It sent me back to the beginning. Let's try this again. Wow, it only lets me play from the beginning. Okay, give me 1 second to click through here. Sorry, all, I'm not used to doing this in my browser. All right, I'm going to share my screen so that when I hit the right slide, we're already here together. Nice little review of where we've been. Sorry. Note to self, don't do PowerPoint in Chrome again. Like I should have just switched computers this morning. All right, here we go. Inclusion statements. So we have sort of two ways of thinking about inclusion statements. One is thinking about things that are descriptive, things that describe your organization as it is now, your policies, your community, organizations who've spent a lot of time doing work on inclusion that can be seen, and this is key, by a casual observer who walks into your space, benefit the most from this kind of statement. And then the other is aspirational, what you hope to be. This conveys that inclusion is a work in progress and that your commitment to improving inclusion is ongoing. This is most useful when your organization is not as diverse as you strive to be. But I would also say that, like me, if I'm looking to see how inclusive an organization is, I trust an organization that has a hefty dose of aspiration versus one that says, like, we're a warm, welcoming space that includes everyone. For a whole series of reasons that I'm happy to talk about more if people have questions about why. But I want to make sure that we have some time to think about a few. So I've heard myself talk a lot, so I'm going to ask if anyone wants to read. If you do, just use the raise hand feature. I mean, if you're not sick of my voice yet, I will read them. So, all right, it looks like you're all not sick of my voice yet. So I'm going to give you a handful of examples of inclusion statements. Normally what we would do is, after we look at the inclusion statements, go into the breakout rooms and either continue your why statements from last time if you didn't finish, or work on inclusion statements. But we're gonna tweak it a little bit here. So bear with me, we're going on the fly here. So Anshe Emet Synagogue, which is a conservative congregation in the Chicago area, this is their statement. A promise to our interfaith families. These days, most Jews live in some form of interfaith family. Sometimes the non-Jewish member is a spouse, sometimes a son or daughter-in-law, grandchild, cousin. No matter the configuration of your family, our goal, like yours, is to keep your family strong. We welcome interfaith couples and families to make Anshe Emet their home. Anshe Emet prides itself on our diverse worship possibilities. We try to meet individuals and families where they are on their Jewish journeys. You're all going to get these slides, so don't worry about like scribbling down notes. We recognize that while differing traditions and belief systems sometimes conflict, they can also be a source of strength and joy in interfaith families. We want to help you build strong Jewish homes and lives while embracing the richness that a multicultural family life brings. And they continue. We recognize that interfaith families may approach a conservative synagogue with some trepidation, unsure whether or not their participation will be encouraged, whether or not they will feel like they really belong. Our answer, the more you participate, the more you belong. At Anshe Emet, we avoid don'ts when it comes to interfaith families and focus as much as possible on do's. Do come worship with us. Do celebrate the Sabbath and the holidays of the Jewish calendar. Do give your kids a Jewish education. Do enjoy the richness of your family, the variety of your beliefs, the wisdom of your customs, the joy of your love. Do give us a chance to embrace you. Let's pause for a second. I'm going to stop sharing. What do you all observe about this statement?
Can you please keep it on the screen?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, I can't fit it all on one screen. But here's the second bit. If it's helpful, I can also throw the link. I can't easily throw the link in, I'm sorry. Oh, there we go. Shelley threw the link in. So if anyone wants to see the whole thing on one page, Shelley just threw the link into the chat. Yeah, it's very positive and welcoming. Yeah, Ben.
This is kind of my opinion of religion in general. I feel like any person who participates more in a religion demonstrates their love and their yearning to be a part of the community. This is a statement that I can actually agree with on a heavy note, because I feel that you shouldn't have to be, a default configuration, to use the language that they mentioned, to be a part of the community. If you pray often, if you go to synagogue very often and so forth, you are a part of the community. That's what it is. This is kind of a quote that I've heard a while ago from Christians, but I think it can apply here as well. I've heard Christians say that the church is not the building in which they pray. The people who come together are the church. And in this regard, it's the same thing. No matter your background, no matter where you come from, I think as long as you put the effort in and as long as you try hard to be a part of the community, you should be respected as one another. That's all. So I really like the statement that this synagogue gave.
Yeah, I think that's a really lovely framing of it. And one thing that I'm going to name here that I love, as a conservative congregation, they do have certain halachic commitments. And you'll note that all of this fits within their halachic commitments. They're not going beyond what they are able to do. They're naming the fact, by the way, that interfaith couples and families might be worried that they're going to be judged, right? So they're doing a lot here. They're framing this positively. They are encouraging people to really lean into who the fullness of their family is. They're normalizing it. They're saying that this is something that is common in so many of our families. And they're saying there are so many ways for you to participate. And really, this is an invitation. So, as I said, I don't usually tell you like, this is my favorite. This hands down is my favorite statement, and I had forgotten about it. It's actually very funny. Somebody who's a faith leader at an interfaith at a conservative congregation in Toronto sent it to me when I was doing the training in Toronto, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. And then I went to the language and optics training that I built at 18 Doors about 2 years ago, and it was in there. So obviously I liked it then also. I'm going to flip to the next one. So this is Beth El Synagogue, again, a conservative congregation. This one is in Omaha, Nebraska. Beth El Synagogue is a welcoming spiritual resource for lifelong conservative Jewish living. We help our 450 plus member families learn, develop lifelong friendships, and celebrate the joys of being Jewish. Beth El welcomes interfaith families, couples, and individuals of all races, heritage, ethnicities, and sexual orientations. We understand Jewish spirituality is a shared journey from which no one should be excluded. Ben, this one also goes exactly to what you said, right? It's about the community and participation. Does anyone want to offer any thoughts about what this one is doing? And then we have a couple more after this. I'll just tell you what this one is doing. It is framing who the community is and what the community is, and then saying these people of diverse backgrounds whether it's interfaith couples, interfaith, interracial, heritage, et cetera, are welcome to participate in that community. So it's doing something a little bit different than on Shamit, right? It's saying, this is who we are, and like, come and take place. You are welcome to belong here, and you will not be excluded. Reform congregation. This is another one of my favorites, and you will, I hope, understand why. We're the small Reform synagogue in the area, the one hidden away almost in the woods. If you've heard of us before, we hope it's because of our incredible social justice legacy, our diverse community, including LGBTQ members, people of color, and people with disabilities, our large percentage of interfaith families, our hardworking bar and bat mitzvah students who regularly inspire us, our young dynamic rabbi and cantor who are changing the face of synagogue life in our area, or maybe just our reputation as the kind of spiritual community where some of us are wearing suits, some of us are wearing jeans, and none of us are judging each other. Together with the help of Jewish wisdom, we're trying to build the kind of lives we mean to live and the kind of world we dream of seeing, one small step at a time. Anyone want to comment on what this one is doing? I tried to bring like very different statements. So just to really crack it open, right? No matter what your community looks like, and I promise we're going to get to one or two that I think, yeah, we have one here that isn't from a synagogue. I mean, this one's like describing the kind of community that is and what they hope that people will experience there, trying to build the kind of lives we mean to live. I love that line. And I also love the line, maybe our reputation as the kind of spiritual community where some of us are wearing suits, some of us are wearing jeans, and none of us are judging each other, right? Like, it's a really like come as you are statement here. It's a community in process. We need you to make everything happen. This is really stating their values, right? Like, this statement isn't about like, we welcome you. This statement is about, this is the kind of community that we are and that you can expect to come and build with us. Sixth and I. So here's the one that's like pseudo synagogue, not really synagogue, performing arts venue, cultural center, all of the things. Sixth and I is a center for arts, entertainment, ideas, and Jewish life in Washington, D.C. We inspire more meaningful and fulfilling lives through an unexpected mix of experiences that embrace the multifaceted identities of those we serve. Yes, they are outside. Beth David is outside Philadelphia and Gladwin, Pennsylvania. So Sixth and I, Washington, D.C. is kind of like a hybrid community center, arts venue, synagogue, and was sort of a model of like doing congregational life differently for a long time and has evolved even more since then. And again, this is a place where they are saying we serve people with different identities, right? That's like core to who we are. And that is what actually keeps this community going. That's what we do, and we aim to inspire those identities. Okay, so we're gonna skip all of this because this was the group work part, and I wanna just stop sharing and spend the last 5 minutes that I have with you. I'm gonna stop screen sharing. I wish that I had more time with you. This is how it always goes. But with an opportunity just to discuss a little bit, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to name it right now. You're going to get the slides and what the group work in your team, not homeroom, was going to be, was either finishing your why statements that we started last time, or if you had finished that, starting to dive into crafting what an inclusion statement might look like, or refining one that you already have with some of these principles in mind. So we're not going to do that. We're going to spend the last 5 minutes like holding space, asking questions, sort of diving into some of the harder topics that we talked about. So first, I'll open it up. Does anyone have any questions for me? As I've already said, I have 10 minutes. How about that? I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes doing that. There's still not enough time for group work, but maybe let's unspotlight my video so that we can see all of the squares. I don't know how to do that on myself. Am I unspotlighted? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. So first of all, I want to open it up for any questions. Yeah, Kim, go for it.
I don't have a question. I really just have a comment. I struggle with these inclusion statements. I married outside the faith. My children are Jewish and non-Jewish. And when it came time for us to find a synagogue and build, our community, what our community was going to look like, these inclusion statements, as warm and fuzzy and as welcoming they all are, the question a lot of interfaith families and couples are struggling with is, am I going to be treated as a second-class citizen? And if the answer to that is, you can do some things, but you can't do everything because of who your mother was. And, my spouse converted, but didn't convert Orthodox. That's the question. And if your inclusion statement is really just warm and fuzzy and doesn't really address the topic that interfaith families and couples care about, it's really just a marketing statement. And I find it a little disingenuous.
Yeah.
So either be upfront and transparent and treat people with respect, or it's fluff.
Right. So I want to name sort of a couple things there. One is, one of the things that I found super fascinating working in synagogues for 8 years is that there is no one size fits all, right? So very often, it was very funny. I would get a phone call from somebody when I worked at a congregation that did have some lines about committees and things like that. And I would talk to, generally the Jewish partner was very concerned, and the partner of a different faith background was like, yeah, of course, I'm not Jewish. And it was really interesting to me. And that's not one size fits all, right? I think it's all across the board that there are people who do want to be full participants, and couples who see anything less than what a Jew can do, a partner from a different background can do, as second-class citizens. And then there are other who don't see it that way. So my sort of comment back would be that I agree 100%. Your inclusion statement needs to match what you're doing, right? You can't just sort of put a fuzzy, warm, fuzzy thing on it, and then you walk in and people are treating you badly, treating you with disrespect, whatever it might be. And at the same time, that there are red lines in some communities that doesn't mean that some kinds of interfaith families won't be very comfortable there, and everything in between, right? And so this is one of the things that was a big takeaway for me when I started diving more and more deeply into learning about interfaith couples, is there are no two who have the exact same needs and desires, right? And that's a whole spectrum. I know interfaith couples who go to Orthodox synagogue, and that's their happy, comfortable place. Or people who send their kids to Hebrew school at Chabad, or whatever it might be. And then I know people who are I'm not stepping into a synagogue, just not doing it. They don't respect me. And so I think one thing I want to encourage is us not to be sort of monolithic about what interfaith couples and families want. And if there's one takeaway for you all, it's think about what your red lines are, and think about using all of the principles of what inclusion looks like, how you can convey those red lines in a way that is not judging, that is just sort of sensitive and inclusive. Another thing that I just want to name is that sometimes when there are a bunch of no's, it is better to have that conversation in person than to list you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this on the website. It's very cold. So one thing I often encourage is say, if you have questions about what your participation in our community might look like, here's the person that you call. And that person is somebody who can have a sensitive conversation. I think many of us in interfaith families have experienced in communities that don't officiate, for example, that somebody calls and says, I'd like the rabbi to officiate a wedding, and the receptionist says, are you both Jewish? And the person says, no, and they say, oh, we don't do that here, sorry, click. There are other ways to have that conversation. And so making sure that the person who is on the end of that call knows how to actually have a conversation that isn't slamming a door. And so that's my sort of best practices here. And it's hard. All of our communities look different. What all of the families and couples coming to us want looks different. And it's going to change from city to city. It's going to change from neighborhood to neighborhood, age bracket to age bracket. Like it's like really wildly diverse. But what we know, like the one unifying factor, interfaith couples, you might remember this from last time, don't want to feel shamed for who they are and what they do. So if there's a way to approach it in that way, with whatever red lines you might have in your community, that's why having these conversations about bias, having these conversations about language are so important. I will say, like, when I do sort of interfaith like inclusion leadership training, it's like 2 full days, right? Like we're just like scratching the surface. And I wish I had more time with you all, but it's just like a small sliver of what sort of developing this muscle looks like. I hope that's helpful. Yeah, Boris.
Sorry, I connected with what Kim said. I think the vision statement can be a very important part of the community, but most people are also going to look around at the rest of the website and see, what places in the community do these values really shine through or not.
Yeah.
And with the acknowledgement that every community has its own flavor, and especially in Montreal, there's a little bit of everything. So I think it starts with the vision statement, but if people are curious, well, that's great, but do you actually officiate at interfaith weddings? Go to the life cycle section and see, and then see what language is used in the rest of the website and the rest of the descriptions of programming. Is there gender neutral language? Is there, are the words interfaith or, other key terms that might be sensitive? Do those come up in other descriptions of what's happening in the community? I think that, people are realistic and they hopefully know that, if a community is not the right fit or they aren't welcoming or they're too welcoming in some way, then they can go somewhere else. And this is Montreal where there's a lot of choices and they just need to, we need to understand that people are going to look beyond the vision statement. That's just the first step, I think.
Right. Yeah. And so you might remember that in the last session, when I talked about language and optics, and I said, like, this is actually just like the surface level, right? This actually is just your way of signaling who you are. And if it doesn't match who you actually are, that's a disservice to you and to the interfaith couples you're trying to reach, right? I want to make that very, very clear that when a lot of places will throw up, like, we are a warm, welcoming community, and then you show up and it's very clear that that is not the case. So being very careful not to overpromise, being very careful to make sure, you might remember there was a quote in the last one about metabolizing the inclusion work, that language and optics are the surface, that really it's what you metabolize as an organization. And hopefully I've started to give you some tools to think about that. Having these conversations about bias, having these conversations about, like, what's a red line, and really clearly stating what some of those are for you will be very, very, very helpful. Other organizations are like already at a different level where an inclusion statement is just like a way of summarizing what appears everywhere else. What I would suggest is try to get there, right? Like, your inclusion statement should be a summary for somebody who wants a quick glance at, like, am I welcome here? But it needs to be matched up with what else appears on the site. That, by the way, goes for race, LGBTQ, disabilities, anyone who has a marginalized identity in any way, shape, or form should see themselves reflected. In like the second I have left, I'm just going to tell you 2 very fast stories of how we did it at Holy Blossom when I was the membership director there. So one was, I was the person who had conversations about what red lines were, or one of the rabbis. We were the like sort of 2-ish people who were assigned to have those conversations. Number one, getting it off of the receptionist who said, sorry, we don't do this here, click, was like the most important part of actually shifting the way that we were perceived, number one. And number 2 is, well, we didn't have a whole lot of people to show for, like, what the values are, because it takes time to shift a culture. We started using like cartoons and things like that. And then we also there were people who really wanted to be ambassadors because they wanted to see more interfaith couples or more multiracial couples or whatever it might be in the synagogue. We found a strategy to have their stories told in a way that felt natural and not gross, because sometimes it can feel like very tokenizing, but it was, I see the synagogue as my partner in doing this Jewish thing because I need a partner in this work, or whatever it might be. I'm going to try and find the My Membership campaign that we put together. I think it's still on the website, and include it in the follow-ups. All in all, this is like hard stuff, which is why I was really hoping we would like be in person. And I know that it's a good thing that we're not all in person right now because COVID's blowing up again. And so thank you all for like your patience, for your fortitude, that's the word I'm looking for your fortitude, for giving each other the benefit of the doubt, and for also like being vulnerable in this space. It's hard in Zoom, and it's hard when a lot of you I know don't really know each other that well. So I want to thank you. I know this was a hard hour and a half-ish, and just really open the door. So as you know, I don't work at 18 Doors anymore, but Adam Pollock, who's the Chief Program Officer, is like really, really wonderful. He unfortunately couldn't be here with us today, but he is open for anyone to contact him if you want to go deeper into this work with 18 Doors. And if there's anything specific to today that you just want to unpack, I can be slow on email sometimes, I will warn you, but you should all have my email address. If not, it's tema@temasmith.com. I am not hard to find. So with that, I want to thank you all, and thank you for interesting and challenging and boundary pushing and all of the important things for inclusion work day that we have had together. I'm sorry that I am not with you in Montreal, but hopefully I will be visiting Montreal next year. So maybe I will look up your organizations and drop in. So thank you all.
Tema, thank you so much. It's 11:08. We do want to transition into the break, but Tema, at least in this current cohort, in our virtual workshops at least, really we can't thank you enough for being with us the past 2 sessions. What you said just in closing is so true, that it takes time to shift a culture, just to quote words that you just shared. And part of that is not moving towards a utopian society or world, but actually creating a space where you can have honest conversations. And I think today, especially, you helped us as a community create a space where we can have honest and sometimes very frank conversations about where we are and where we want to be moving ahead. So thank you for being with us, and have a good rest of your morning. To everybody else, we will give you the 15-minute break as promised, and we're going to reconvene in 15, listen for the music, and we'll segue into part 2. So thank you, Tema, and we'll see you all in 15. Okay.
Things are gonna be easier. Ooh, child, things will be brighter. Ooh, child, things are gonna be easier. Ooh, child, things will be brighter. Someday, put it together and we'll get it undone. Someday.
One of my personal favorite songs too. So thank you, Shelley. Thank you to whoever chose this song. Welcome back, everyone. So we're transitioning back from break. If you can put your, if you are able and willing to put your videos on so that we know that you are with us, we are going to segue into part 2. And Rabbi Pell, the floor is all yours.
Oh, good morning, everybody. I'm so grateful to be here with you and to see all of your wonderful faces. And I know that obviously we would much rather be snacking together during the break and being in person. So I appreciate your diligence and endurance in still doing the whole morning together, and I'm really grateful that you're here with us. So I wanted to start just by, we're sort of really in the thick of things right now, and it can feel like, I know several of the teams are feeling like, how are we going to get in our interviews? And those of you who have already done a whole bunch of interviews are thinking, how are we going to, figure out what we're hearing? How are we going to move into brainstorming? And so I just want to take stock for a minute and say, every single person here and all of our teammates who are not here, you are doing something unprecedented in the Montreal Jewish community. And that what an amazing group of people that is all here because we want to build a more inclusive, a more user-centered, a more accessible Jewish community for the city of Montreal. And I think that continues to bring me such joy and such excitement of working on this with you all. And that, we're going to have different ways of doing that. We're going to, our institutions have different capacities for doing that. We have different reasons for doing that, but really what an amazing group that's united here trying to take those big steps as a community, and within your own institutions, and that not all of them are easy. If they were easy, we would have already done them, right? And we're digging into our conversations with our people, and we're trying to be inspired by them and trying to be specifically inspired by them. I was working with the CJA team on Friday, and really listening to the specifics is the key here, and we asked ourselves, right, Judy, we asked a couple of times, like, did we hear that? Like, is that what they were saying? Letitia too, right? You were bringing in things. So, and I want to re-offer as well, if you would like me to be at your team meetings coming up, either if you haven't gotten to team meeting number 4 yet, or just looking forward, I am always happy if it is free in my calendar. I am so happy to be there with you. So I just wanted to take a moment to say, this amazing group has come so far, so many conversations, so much wonderful thinking and discussing, and so many ideas already of, what is this going to become? And I want to reiterate that for me and for Carly and for Dana and for Lindsay, this is not a one-off, right? This is an ongoing commitment, and that as you all are continuing on with your interviews and we're moving into brainstorming, which is our topic today, and then into prototyping things, that you are becoming the community's experts. My goal, as a CLAL faculty member, is that you need me less and less, right? That you really are the community's experts, and that each of you will continue to shepherd new projects and new ideas, whether it be in the area of engagement for interfaith couples, families, and individuals, or other areas, other groups that haven't felt as included or haven't felt as connected. So just congratulations to everyone for being here thus far, for the amazing work you've already done. And I'm really very excited to be moving, just transitioning from our research phase, looking into our design phase, and also to share with you. I shared with the team leaders on Friday, but I'm going to actually be rearranging the remaining weeks of our time to give you all a little more time to do those interviews, to hear those voices, because that activity of actually listening to our people is the crux of it all. And I know that for some people, it's been a little harder to identify who can we talk to schedule those conversations. So you might have noticed, if you have logged into the Spark Montreal website recently, that the remaining weeks have been relocked again. It's because I'm still writing them to accommodate where everybody is at. And I hope that you also receive that as I'm trying to practice what I'm teaching, which is the user centricity. This has to work for you. So I'll be getting those up again as soon as possible. I've blocked off the rest of my day actually to keep on running. But the purpose of that is really for this to be what you need it to be. And so, take strength from the work you've already done and from our being together. And like, everything you're learning is amazing. Everything you're learning is amazing. I want to highlight, even for those of you who had a little more trouble finding people to talk to, that is also learning, right? All of this is teaching us things about our institutions, about ourselves, we've talked before about reframing failure, right? As actually, this is learning. So, if you did have trouble finding people to talk to, why might that be the case? What might it teach us about our institutions' connections with interfaith couples, families, and individuals? How do we track people's various identities if we do? Why don't we if we don't? And again, that's totally value neutral. Like, there are lots of reasons, and we talked about those with several of the teams, of why, like, this is not a question we ask at all, nor do we ever want to, right? So all of those things are, I think, important for us to be learning from. I want to open up just to hear some voices and just ask if anyone learned anything from the process of finding people to interview, or the process of setting up interviews. What did you learn? What advice would you give to another Spark group of that process of finding people? Can we surface that a little bit? And then maybe we'll hear a little bit about what you've already started learning, but just the process of finding people. What did you learn? Sarah, is that a hand up, or are you just kind of I was moisturizing. Anyone want to share? Barbara, we've talked a little bit about it. I know that you tried a bunch of different tactics to find people to interview. Would you share a little bit? And then we'll hear from Miri.
Sure. Yeah, we tried a bunch of different calls using different wording in newsletters, on posters. We tried reaching out to other organizations who might have interfaith families in their communities. We got some response, like some curiosity in reply to those calls, but no real candidates for conversation. They were interested in what we were doing, but they were, I would say, suspicious, perhaps. And there was no follow-up when I invited them to chat and just allow us to know them a bit better. We had a lot more luck with one of our team members. Was able to connect us to somebody who was an interfaith family, who connected us to other people. So that's where most of our prospects have come from. The general blasts do not seem to have garnered us any prospects that could help us at all.
Barbara, I want to underline one thing you said, which was people seemed a little suspicious when we wanted to talk to them. And I actually want to posit that if we did this again next year, continuing with like different institutions, it would probably be easier for them, because this Spark Montreal would have already happened. In other words, I don't doubt that there are people who are suspicious of the Jewish community wanting to talk to interfaith couples, families, and individuals, because maybe they have felt like the institutional Jewish community hasn't heard them, right? So I actually want to take that and say that is probably true, and also that's actually why we're here, right? So some of that piece, and I think, Barbara, what you said, I bet other teams have found too, it's the personal relationships that are built already out of trust and out of understanding that are garnering more people to talk to. And so like let's put that in our toolbox of what does it mean to engage people? What does it mean to connect with people? What does it mean for people to feel like they, I don't even want to say have a voice, but like have people they can talk to, you know, in our institutions. And that I think a lot of it is relational, especially if you maybe be you might be a person who doesn't see yourself reflected as often. You know, so that's the thing I would say about it is you all are creating the groundwork that makes this work continue to be easier because people know that all of you and all of your institutions want to work on this, are working on this, right? So even just the action of putting a call out, of talking to people is shifting what is happening in the community. Miri, you had something, and then I'm gonna jump into thinking about brainstorming and get us into our, you know, our next steps. Yeah, Miri.
Well, I don't want to repeat what you just said, Rabbi.
Oh, I took the words from you.
So, I mean, definitely relational, but setting it up not like, oh, you are a token person and we want to get the experience that you have as a token member of this community. It really was relational. It was, we recognize that we have not heard about you and your experience, and we feel like what you have to share is valuable. So it's you specifically as opposed to you as a token person in this relationship or family scenario. So I felt that people were very, I mean, it almost was like an unburdening rather than an interview. And the other part is that I did have a couple of people who said, oh, you don't want to hear about my experience. I don't really identify as interfaith. That's not kind of what my journey was. And I said, no. So what is your journey? Did you ever identify as interfaith? Why do you no longer? You're precisely the person I want to speak to. So just the framing I found really helped. People were really, you know, that I reached out to were happy to just have a conversation rather than something official.
Yeah. And I think part of what I'm taking from what you said, Miri, is saying really clearly the reason, you know, like, I don't feel like we've done a good job and we want to do better. And to be able to say that instead of, you know, and we've talked a little bit before about, you know, pulling back the curtain and letting people see messy. And that's a risk, but also, you know, it's like just saying, like, I feel like we haven't done as good a job as we want to. And now we got a whole team working on this, and I would just love your help, you know, and because we care about what you have to say. It's huge. It's huge. All right. There's so much more to say, and we have a good chunk of time for your home groups a little later. So there's much more to process and think about together. But for now, I want to shift us into thinking about what our next steps are. And the reason is because we're coming to the end of our interviews, and we are moving into how do we design our response? How do we design what it is we're going to offer in response to all of these conversations? And again, to underline the fact that you could do all of them. Like, you could think of 20 different ideas, and then you could do them all if you wanted to at various points. So that's the delight of doing brainstorming in a really productive way, is you don't have to just choose one. For the sake of this time period, maybe you want to choose one, right? Because we want to practice doing this process. But that's actually what we're going to be talking about, is what, you know, how do we brainstorm effectively? What does it mean to do that? And I know we've all been in brainstorms for like many, many years. Could somebody just share with me, if you could just picture for a second, what was a time when you were in a brainstorm that wasn't so great? Just picture like an actual time, or like, you know, a composite image for yourself. And so what made it not so great? What do you got? Yeah, Karen.
So, I mean, I think the parameters of a brainstorm really should be that no idea
is, either bad or controversial. If you're shutting down the brainstorm before it even happens by excluding certain kinds of ideas, then you're less likely to find it productive, right? If everybody's going to say this same kind of thing, what's the point?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I have an idea. That's a bad idea. Well, then we have no ideas. Right. Right. So shutting things down. What else? Did you ever have a brainstorm where it was just one person's attempt to get everyone to agree with their idea they already had? Maybe just me. I don't know.
I was going to jump in also after Karen spoke that I've been in brainstorms where it's not necessarily that people are shutting it down, but people are throwing in ideas and dismissing and saying like my idea is better. So I found
it's
that
like
very
trying to
frustrating.
win, go fish or war, right? Yeah, which one is
Yeah.
better? Yeah, instead of just surfacing as many ideas as we can, it's like, well, how about this one? Which is obviously, yeah. So it becomes a competition instead of a collaboration. Anything else?
I think
Yeah,
that.
Sarah. Oh yeah, Anya and then Sarah. Go for it. Anya, go for it, and then we'll hear from Sarah. Yeah.
I think that sometimes I've like experienced brainstorm sessions that are almost like too much like blue sky thinking, where I actually find it difficult if you don't have any, if you remove all of like the like challenges and boundaries, it actually becomes really hard to like center the ideas around something. And sometimes I think I've been in situations where we just kind of keep, it's like, yeah, we could keep coming up with ideas forever, but like there is a sort of like functional purpose to this in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. And Sarah.
I was going to add that sometimes being warmed up to brainstorm, like sometimes in the, like obviously we're about to go into brainstorm mode because we're talking about it, but like not being warmed up or prepared for it. It's just like someone's talking. And then it's like next slide is a blank slate. And it's like, great. So just like have ideas now. And then nobody wants to break the ice. People may not everyone's been paying attention. Like, so kind of mentally like being very present, entering into the brainstorming discussion, I think helps.
Yes. So let's actually look at, we're going to look at a brief brainstorm and we're going to sort of derive some guiding principles for ourselves of what might make a good brainstorm. Is the video, well, it's loading right now. Can you hear it and see it? Okay.
All right, team. Thanks for coming for a brainstorm today. We have a really interesting topic. The local zoo, the visitors are down 20%. So how might we boost the number of visitors to the zoo? This is a serious problem for them. They want to stay open. They need more funding, all this kind of good stuff. So let's spend a few moments now first and get a few ideas down. Remember, we're going for quantity. Let's see how many ideas we can get. And also, there's so many good ideas out there. Let's push ourselves, try to get closer to the ridiculous. That might be brilliant. All right, so I'll start us off. I had date night. So, and you might hang out with the animals that are in action, if you know what I mean. All right, what else? What else you got? Oh yeah, what do you got?
What if we do a dress up like your favorite animal day? So it's like a costume theme thing.
Very cool.
What about zoo pop-up at places that kids frequent, the mall, school, parks?
Home Depot I know has programs for little kids to build like, birdhouses and stuff like that. So it could be all these different crafts, but they're sort of animal lessons so
Love
kids
it,
learn.
love
And
it. I have a night camping, so you get to camp overnight there. So let's get a 5 or 10 more.
So I figure loyalty cards work for airlines and for burritos, so why not have it work for the zoo?
Building out the whole celebrity thing, what if like we pretend that animals are celebrities and we give out like a gossip magazine as an advertisement?
So for an hour every day, they vacate the cages and you get to go swing on the bars and everything that the monkeys have. So, zoo turn playground.
That's awesome.
What we'll do next is we'll look at these and look for some themes and cluster a couple. And then I think we should even prototype 1 or 2 of these and then take them over to the zoo. It's gonna be great.
All right, so what are some of the things you saw in that video, which let's use that as like a great brainstorm example. What did you see?
I like the fact they were able to like quietly think to themselves before sharing the idea.
you don't feel crowded out by other people's ideas. Like, oh, you already have them here, so you might as well share them. Yeah. What else?
I think that everybody was writing them down and not just calling them out. I think that can be sort of like a safer space to be able to control your message and then share it with someone. We've been doing that. Judy uses the Jamboard when we're working together, and I find it really helpful that everybody is, there's like a vision of everybody on the board, which is nice.
Yeah. I saw a lot of smiles, right? It looked fun. Like, I want to have fun and think of crazy things. Yeah, Karen.
So I thought, I guess it was at the beginning, the way that the facilitator put himself kind of by taking what might be the most ridiculous, you know, he was doing like animal mating.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important as a facilitator to build a safe space by putting yourself out there first, because otherwise, how are other people going to know that you know, what ideas are going to be accepted if you're not putting yourself on the line primarily?
Yeah. And I hope you also felt the texture of, like, a lot of those ideas are totally impractical, right? But they were delightful. So, you know, the woman who kind of giggled to herself and said, you know, they'll take the animals out and you get to play in the animal enclosures. Like, the zoo's not going to do that, but maybe it would actually be the core of like a really great idea they might do, right? So here's just some tips, and it's also on your handout for today. The first one is just defer judgment, right? So don't try to consider whether it's practical or stupid or whatever. You know, don't say we don't have enough budget for that. Encourage wild ideas, build on the ideas of others. So, you know, if someone has a great idea, make it even better, but not in like a my idea is better way, right? Like Jody said, but like just, yeah, and right, yes, and anybody's done improv, like yes, and it, right? Yeah, and also what if we, you know, did this other thing? Stay focused on the topic. So really, you know, put all your energy into that. You can see they're all standing up around a table, really focusing. One conversation at a time. Don't end up, you know, this sometimes happens too, like, oh, well, you know, you could also, you know, like end up talking to the person next to you. Just put it out there. Just put it all out there together. Be visual. Some of the people's ideas, they actually drew them first and then they kind of described them later. And then finally go for quantity. Get as many ideas out there as you can. Do not sort them yet, right? Just as many creative ideas as we can. Sarah, I appreciate what you said about like warm-ups, right? It's quite intense. We're doing intense creative work, and you want to kind of, you know, maybe when in your next team meeting after this, you're going to be doing your brainstorms. Maybe you want to do a physical warm-up. Maybe you want to yell. I don't know, right? Think about what will warm you up and make you feel silly and creative, because some of those silliest ideas may become your best ideas. We're also going to, and by the way, we're going to do a sample brainstorm in a couple of minutes. We're going to start really big. And I put this also in your team meeting. You know, you're going to start with impossible, illegal, and embarrassingly stupid ideas just to get you out of the box of, you know, well, I guess we could have another family Shabbat program, you know, like get out, like just leave behind everything you've always done. This is, by the way, how you vanquish the we've always done it this way demon, right? Just like think of the most wild and crazy ideas just to get you thinking about them. The second round, we're going to say it has to cost $1 million, because then you can just dream, you can dream huge. And then you don't have that little part of you that's like, but we don't have the budget for that. Forget about the budget for now. Your $1 million idea might be able to be done in $500. Like, you know, you actually can translate stuff that is really big into things that are more cost effective, especially when you're trying a prototype or a pilot. And then finally, mixing and matching. That's where maybe you're going to have your more practical ideas, but you've populated, you know, the field with so many cool ideas. That if you're trying to do the ones you might, you know, think of, okay, well, how can we turn this into something we might do? You have so much to work from. Like Judy highlighted, I believe it was you, Judy. Yeah, like taking a moment to write things down, so important, because then everybody feels like they actually have the space to do that. Not everyone is an oral processor like I am. And also that it makes sure that, you know, your ideas, you don't feel like they get lost. You know what? I'm not going to show this clip because we're running a little late. This is a clip from the Lego movie, which I'm just going to describe it to you. I'm not hearing a lot of activity. Pause the clip.
I don't think he's ever had an original thought in his life.
That's not true. For instance, one time I want.
Okay.
So if you've seen the Lego movie, you might recall that that Emmett is the main character, and everybody thinks he's a master builder and he's supposed to save the day. And he says, "Oh, I only ever had one unique idea, and it was for a double-decker couch." And everyone says, "That's a terrible idea." And then they end up, later on in the movie, they end up in trouble and they're on a submarine, and it turns out he's built the double-decker couch and it's behind him, and everybody goes, "What is that monstrosity?" And he says, "It's a double-decker couch. I know, it's kind of stupid." And then later, it actually turns out that the double-decker couch saves all of their lives because they're high. I don't know, have you seen the movie where they like pop up and they're sitting in the little seats of the double-decker couch? So Shelly put the clip there. I'm not going to show you the whole clip, but watch it later. And what I mean to say from this clip is sometimes the stupidest idea saves the day, right? So be sure you get all your double-decker couches down when you're brainstorming. Let yourself have ridiculous and stupid ideas, because sometimes those are the ones you really need. So we're going to do a little practice, and we're actually going to do it on something that many people are thinking about right now. And I know that only 2 of the teams are synagogues, so I actually chose this precisely because we actually have lots of people in this group who may not even attend services, who may not even be Jewish, right? So we're gonna have lots of different ideas, lots of different opinions in this brainstorm. We're going to talk about returning to in-person prayer services, which is what's happening right now. And a lot, as a rabbi, a lot of rabbis are having conversations among ourselves, like, what are we going to do? Is anyone ever going to come back? What do we do about people's comfort? What are we going to do, right? So I've given us a how might we. Now, in your team meetings, if you've done team meeting number 4, you have fashioned yourself a how might we. If you haven't yet, your goal is to get to a how might we that we talked about last time, right? Which is your mission statement. I think it was Sarah from MJM who said, oh no, it was Anya, right? You said sometimes a little bit too blue sky. I actually need some direction. That's what your how might we is. It's your direction, so that you have a reason and a goal and an outcome you are trying to design for with your brainstorm. That keeps us honest and keeps us on track. And also like a little bit of structure and a little bit of what do I want to say, of like restriction means that sometimes we have the best ideas coming out because we actually have an idea of what we're designing for. So how might we design the environment and content of in-person services so that returning congregants can feel seen, welcome back, and like they were missed? That's my version of what I think. If I had done 50 interviews with congregants, I might have ended up with that how might we. So we're actually just going to spend a couple of minutes brainstorming. And maybe we'll just take 1 minute, because I know I want to get you into your home groups. But the first round is going to be impossible, illegal, and embarrassingly stupid, or embarrassing. It doesn't have to be all 3 of those things. But I'm going to ask everyone to unmute. And Shelly, would you mind being our note taker in the chat? I would so appreciate that. So everyone unmute, take like 10 seconds to write down a couple ideas or to think of them. And then we're going to hear some ideas, impossible or illegal or embarrassingly stupid ideas, to make returning congregants feel seen, welcome back, and like they were missed. So normally I would give you more time, but I'm going to jump in. I'm going to say I want to make cardboard cutouts of every single congregant and put them on the chairs so that when they come in, they know we've been thinking of them, and they can even like sit down at a chair that's been reserved for their cardboard cutout. Who else has something?
So going on the feeling seen, I was thinking we could do cutouts of computer screens, so that we've all been on Zoom for so long that we could each have our own Zoom frame so that we're all being seen, but now in person.
Could we even, I'm going to add to that, could we even like at one point dump them all in the trash, like in a triumphant, that's how I'm feeling lately.
Sounds good.
Love it, Jody. What else?
I'll throw one out.
Yeah, give us a double-decker couch of an idea, Carly.
Yeah, what about a slideshow of photos that have been submitted from families, from milestones that have occurred, whether it's a wedding, whether it's a bar mitzvah, birthday party, a massive slideshow.
That is neither impossible, illegal, or embarrassing stupid. It's actually just an excellent idea, and I love it. And I feel like I would just like be weeping if I saw that. It would be wonderful. What else? Give us like maybe 2 more ideas, and then we'll move into the next round. This is your practice also, because this is what you're going to do in your team meetings.
And each family walk across the stage like they're graduating and kind of welcome them back.
Yeah, I love it. We could give them something ridiculous too, of like, I don't know what it would be. I love that because it gets to the like individualized, right? Like we really see you. What else? Oh, somebody had a hand. Was it Pascal? Who was it?
I was gonna say, what about like a fireworks display? Because everybody likes fireworks.
Yeah, it's a celebration, right? Okay. Wonderful brainstorming. Love it. So now let's do another round, and this one has to cost more than $1 million. What do you got? Actually, you know what? Let's take 10 seconds. Think to yourself, $1 million ideas for people returning to feel seen, welcome back, and like they were missed. $1 million doesn't go that far, actually. Think about it in the housing market. I don't know. Okay, I'll start. What if we actually had like a special spa room built for every single congregant on the grounds of the synagogue, and they could like, do a spa thing before they enter, so they feel refreshed and just like so luxuriated and like beloved. What else you got?
Can we just shout it out?
Please shout it out.
Book like a top tier local talent, like because their fees can be a lot higher to do kind of like a big welcome back Havdalah that's like very entertainment, very showbiz.
Love it. Drake is coming for Havdalah. It's going to be amazing. What else?
Could hire like
everyone.
All right, Pascal and then Netta.
Sorry. I mean, obviously like kosher or whatever, but like a top tier like restaurant from the place and have like a really fancy like kiddish lunch.
Yeah. Netta, what you got?
I was just thinking some kind of like Broadway level musical production representing like each member in the production.
Yes, that's fabulous. Love it. Yeah, Miri.
I'm muted. Oh no, I'm unmuted. Cancel membership fees for the year.
Yes. That's practical. That is a very practical observation. Great. I love it. Free membership for the next 5 years. I don't know, whatever it is. We missed you. We want you. Love it. And so round 3, maybe we'll leave that, but the idea is mixing and matching. Don't trash your double-decker couches right away. See what you can find. So just a little bit on how you narrow down your idea, because that's going to be the second part of your next team meeting. You're going to do all this brainstorming, and then you're going to have hopefully 40 ideas, right? And then the question is, how do we actually narrow this down? And in the team meeting instructions, you're going to like vote. You have like 5 stickers to vote with, but when you make your choices, what are you looking at? So the first one is think about what aligns with your personal interests and superpowers, your institution's mission, right? If the key activities aren't actually aligned with your institution's mission or vision, it might not be the best idea for you, but like pass it along to someone for whom it is actually. The next one is it likely to meet the needs of the people you want to serve? So just double check yourself, is it actually doing the thing we want it to do? Is it going to result in the outcome we want to design for? Is it actually addressing what we heard in the interviews? So which one does that the best, or which handful of them does that like really, really well? We wanted to approach the problem from a unique angle, just like, does it feel like no one's tried this before? And finally, just don't rule it out because it feels complicated, unfamiliar, risky, or expensive. It might actually be the inspiration for a more doable idea. So just as an example, there was a team that did a Spark run that we did in New York City, and they crafted a how might we question about helping Hebrew school parents actually relieve stress, feel connected, feel served by the synagogue, and like they were the ones actually being served and not just their kids. And so they had this crazy idea of like a full-fledged spa day, you know, with like, you know, special brownies, or, you know, they like made this very elaborate thing. But then they said, you know, that's not that bad of an idea. And they actually created a little lounge, and they had like smoothies, and, you know, they had a version of that that actually was so well received that lots of people started coming and making connections, and had a huge impact on the community. So, you know, your crazy idea might not actually be so crazy. So I just want to preview what's coming up next, and then we'll go into home groups. So I keep doing this. We've distilled down our interviews. You're getting to a point where you have a how might we question. And so hopefully now you can see why that how might we question is so important, because it gives shape to your brainstorm. And like I was telling the Federation team on Friday, your how might we is really good when you say it and then you immediately have 20 ideas, right? Like it's there to as like fertilizer for your ideas. That's like really giving you the inspiration and the structure in which to have those ideas. You're gonna start with your how might we. You're gonna have a brainstorm like this. Then you're gonna kind of vote and just to sort through which ones should we do. And then by the end, you'll hopefully pick one that you want to further develop, and that you want to create some kind of prototype. And the prototype, think of it like a mock-up, right? Maybe it's a visual, maybe it's just a poster of the event, maybe it's like a what we call a storyboard, just kind of like a comic almost, you know, walking you through the different steps of what the person might experience. And then you're actually, over the next several weeks, you're going to start showing this mock-up to potential users. Maybe you go back to the people you've interviewed, maybe you talk to new people, but you know, always good to go back to the people you've interviewed, because it continues to build a relationship with them, and they're going to tell you what they think. So we're going through another round of getting people's thoughts, but this time it's on something we created from what they told us. So that's what's coming up over the next number of weeks, wrapping up your interviews, getting to your how might we, doing your brainstorming meeting, and then creating something you can show people that's like a mock-up of the idea you're working on. As I said, I've restructured the rest of Spark Montreal to give you all more time to complete your interviews and develop your designs. And so I also have sent out a new key dates. All of the team meetings and workshops are the same dates and times. So you don't have to reschedule anything. It's just the content is shifted a little to give you more time. All right, now I want to go and spend some time in our home groups. And Carly, I just want to check in. Do you want full 15 minutes at the end, or could we cheat it to 10? Let's cheat it to 10. So let's give you all 20 minutes in your home groups. And I put two questions on your handout. And Shelly, would you mind just dropping those in the chat from that agenda that I sent out while I'm describing it? So the first is just, you know, sometimes we've seen people really, you know, teams really want to have new ideas, really want to have new approaches, but that how we've always done it is like a magnet. It just draws us back, right? And so I'm going to ask you to discuss together how might you guard against that tendency to try things you've already done, because they are safer, because they are proven, right? Because they have less risk of failure. So just how might you be able to guard against that together? What are the payoffs? What are the risks? And then the second question, just going around and sharing, how have your most recent interviews compared to your first interview? What have you learned through interviewing? And what advice would you give someone? You can pick as a group only one of them. You can try to get both of them, whatever is useful to you. But those are the two questions I would suggest you maybe tackle together. Okay, so you know what? Shelly, were you able to find it? Not yet. Dun, dun, dun. Got it. Okay. Perfect. So that has the questions on it. And we will send you into your groups in 1 second. Just making sure that works. Does it work? No problem, Carly. Yeah. See you soon. Okay.
Yeah.
I can't hear it.
Magic System, Red One, Shawky. ça va aller. On te met l'ambiance à gogo. Tous ensemble on fait le show. On t'invite à la magie, y a pas de raccourci. Oublie tes soucis et viens faire la folie. On t'invite à la magie, y a pas de raccourci. Oublie tes soucis. Oh, 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 oh.
You stopped at the best part.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope that gave a little bit of a chance to talk about, just set our intentions for our next kind of section of our work together, really letting ourselves think big and surprising and differently and creatively as we respond to what we heard, as we move into designing what it is we want to put out there, and to collaborate on that together, utilize everyone's creative juices, and give ourselves permission to try new things that may not succeed, to do things a little bit differently, and to to hopefully, like the designer in the first the first video said, and maybe come up with something terrific, right? So so that's where we're headed, and I'm really excited to help you and support you in this, and to see what we all come up with. Carly.
Thank you, Rabbi Pal. So I have, with the remaining 8 minutes, I have a few updates that I wanted to share with everybody, just to keep you posted and to share kind of really what's coming, looking ahead. Before we do, I want to try something a little bit differently today, especially because we are wrapping up our final 3-hour workshop, and while still fresh in your minds, and before we lose a couple of you that might have to log off a couple of minutes early, we're actually going to dive as a group into our survey, just like we do at the end of every single workshop. Shelley, thank you for dropping it there. So I'm going to put myself on mute, and I'm going to give you the gift of time just for the next minute or two. Please fill out this survey. Your feedback, I cannot even emphasize how important it is to us. It helps us design around you. So I'm hoping to have almost 100% response rate, and we're going to dive into that. So please take a moment, and thank you in advance for filling that out. I'm going to start talking in maybe a minute. So simply in the interest of time, if you are midway through sentence, hold on to it. And I'm going to ask if you could keep that open before you log off, or maybe right after you log off, finish that last sentence, that last question, hit submit, and we thank you very much in advance. So I'm going to take you back just with the remaining 5 minutes that we have to share quickly, a couple of updates so that we can end promptly, as we always try to do every single session. So the first update that I have is about the June symposium. There is something very, very special being planned for June 13th. We've asked you to hold the time in your schedules from 5 to 7 p.m. There will be a formal invitation coming your way in the weeks ahead, and we are really, really hoping that we can do this in person. This is not like something we have ever done before. In my 4 years of working at Federation CJA, based on some of the things that we're going to be doing a little bit differently, I think this will be a first, not just for our team, but also for our community. And the big hint that I'm going to give today is that it's going to be drawing on the collective wisdom of the group and the best experts that we have around the table, which is you. Which is why we want to ensure that this is noted in your calendars. And as I said, more information will be shared in the weeks ahead through emails, and you will hear more about this coming from me. So that's June 13th symposium. Stay tuned for more. It's going to be quite special, and we hope that you're able to join us. And for those of you that have conflicts for whatever reason, please let us know, and we're going to find creative ways to ensure that your voice is part of what is being planned. So that's what I got for June symposium. I'm going to share my screen very quickly and walk through, hold on one second here. Okay, just a thumbs up. Can everyone see my screen? Wonderful. I'm going to talk very quickly just to give some sprinkling of what's coming in the weeks ahead. And as part of your participation in the Spark Montreal Fellowship, every team will have access to research and development microgrants. What are these microgrants? These are grants that will allow you to test, retest, and to launch what might be innovative prototypes or pilots aimed at serving our interfaith constituents and community. These are meant to empower you, and I'm very, very proud to share on behalf of our team, and with generous thanks to the Passport to Jewish Life funders, that the microgrants are actually going to be up to a maximum of $2,000 per team, building off of what was previously communicated, which was $1,500 per team. So extremely, extremely exciting. And it's thanks to the generosity of the Passport to Jewish Life funders. This is going to be launched in conjunction with, as Rabbi Appel mentioned, our final unit, which is design, that's coming to us next month, May 2022. This is really going to help us enter the next chapter of this fellowship, and you're going to have roughly 6 months to put these grants, if your team chooses to apply for them, into use and practice. It will allow you to put what you have learned with us since January and through this process into action, and it provides more opportunity to support your change efforts as well as future work looking ahead. So this is what is coming. In terms of the key dates, just to share kind of high level today, we're going to be launching the application actually on our final workshop together, our final virtual workshop together, pardon me, on May 25th. And the application will be shared with all the teams. This is kind of the key piece that I wanted to communicate. It's going to remain open starting from May 25th all the way until the end of July. And this is after the symposium, knowing that some teams might not be ready to apply until June, possibly July. There's going to be rolling applications, and they will be reviewed as they come in a timely fashion. Disbursements of these microgrants are going to take place between August and December. and with the expectation that any pilots take place ultimately prior to December 31st, 2022. So this in a nutshell is the grant timeline. This will be emailed to you. I just wanted to share a sprinkling of what is coming, of what is being planned, and what is ultimately going to build on all of your experiences to date. We are here to support you between especially now and June. The team here at Federation CJA, myself, Dana, Rabbi Appel on behalf of CLEL, and what is also in the works to ensure that there is support in the weeks and in the months ahead is we're actively looking at additional and extra and above consultation, office hours, and team coaching that all the teams will have access to, and more instructions, criteria, guidelines about how these microgrants are going to work will come in May 2022. So that is sort of the key messaging that I wanted to share with everyone today. It's 12:31. Circle to me offline if you have any questions. This is just a little sprinkling prior to the next workshop that we have. So what I'm going to say, these slides will come, Tema's slides will come, and we so look forward to seeing you 1 month from now on Wednesday, May 11th at our next workshop. And to those of you that are noting, whether it's plagues, whether it's eggs, or whether it's anything else, I wish you all a safe and happy and healthy long weekend for those of you that get the long weekend coming up. And be in touch with us if you have any questions, feedback, reflections, or just want to check in. So happy Monday to everybody. Please submit the survey, and we wish you a wonderful rest of the day. So thank you. Bye, everyone.